our session today is all about unboxing what's new in Q2. So there's a lot of new features that have come out in Postman. Postman is an ever-changing and ever-growing product, and we have a lot of new updates for you in Q2. If you were able to join our unboxing session in Q1, the session is actually there's many more features that have come out, and we like to keep up to date with what's new, so that way y'all are up to date with all of our new features and updates. So just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Pooja Mistry. I'm a developer advocate here at Postman. I've been a dev advocate at Postman for about a year now, and it's been a great experience. And I love sharing everything that Postman's been up to, all the new features that we have going on. And I'm joined by my colleague, Arlemy. So Arlemy, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Arlemy Turpel. I'm based in France, and I've been working in developer relations at Postman for about the last 4 years now. But same again, always very happy to share with you what to make of Postman and make the best use of it.
Awesome. So now that you know a little bit about us, we would love to take a moment to get to know a little bit more about you. And before we do that, let's dive into our agenda. So once we know where you're coming from, we'd love to also talk to you about some of our new features, and we'll walk through them. And then in the end, we'll share some resources, and we'll always have some time for Q&A. So with that, I wanted to start this poll just to kind of get a little bit more understanding about who you are and how much experience you may have with Postman, and whether or not you consider yourself an API producer or an API consumer, or both. So feel free to take that time to just answer that poll, and that way we get a better idea of your thoughts and experiences with Postman as well.
And just in case you're not familiar with producer and consumer, what these are, if you're creating APIs with your team and making them available for other people, then you fit in the producer category. And if you're just consuming APIs, so pretty much what I'm going to do a lot of today, you're on the consumer sort of thing. So you can be both as well. And I see a few people that are both. So let's give you a bit more time to answer the poll, and then I'll let Pooja go through the results.
Awesome. So I think a good amount of you have answered. I think we have over 75% of participants that have participated in the poll. So share. Yeah, go for it.
Cool.
So what I see is that there's a lot of people that are pretty new to Postman, that have used Postman for less than 6 months, but most folks have, are in that 1 to 3 year mark. And it's good to see that we have some avid users of Postman. And it looks like we have more people that consider themselves consumers of APIs. I think anyone who's ever hit an API endpoint or discovered an API is definitely classified as a consumer. And then it's good to see that we have some folks that are consider themselves both. So I think it's nice that we have a diverse crowd in today's session.
Yeah, I think the good news for all of you is that we've got news for everyone, whether you're one or the other or both. There's new stuff for all cases.
Yeah. So that's I'm glad to see that. So let me go ahead and share those results and stop sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. And so now we wanted to take this time to talk through our new features, and we're going to I think if one of our moderators would be willing to share this collection in the chat. We're going to be talking through some new features and using this time to do a lot of our demos of these features. So if you wanted to just take a look at this collection that we'll be working with, Arlemy is going to go ahead and share that, but you should see this What's New in Postman collection, and we're going to be doing some interesting demos and walkthroughs through that. So Arlemy, did you want to take this time to dive right in?
Cool. So in that public workspace, the What's New in Postman, there's a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of collections. That's the one we're using quarter on quarter, and we keep on adding new stuff. For now, I'm going to put it aside because I'm not going to start with this. We'll get to it later. But to show you all of the new features, what we try to do usually, we try to craft a bit of a story, and we tell you from whether you're an API producer or API consumer, what you can do in Postman. So we always start from the same place, which should be pretty familiar with you all. This is your Postman homepage. So whenever you open Postman, whether it's on the web or in the app, and here I'm using the app, that's what you're greeted with. So you've got the list of popular APIs, the recently visited workspace, etc. So one of the things that's new, I tend to describe it as like the writer's block solution to like API consumers. So I'll start from scratch and I'll go ahead and create a new workspace. So I'll go here and create a new workspace. So I'm going to make this one a team workspace. So you have like other options if you want to create one that's just personal for you, public, etc. And we call it unboxing what's new in Q2, and just create it. So one of the things that's new here is that little box at the top, which is called Workspace Template. So now instead of you having to create everything from scratch, if you're not familiar with what you can do in Postman, you can browse these workspace templates. And what they effectively do, they generate the workspace overview, a bunch of collections that are workable collections that you can actually start playing with just to see what Postman does. So I'll go ahead and take the API testing one, because that's what Postman is mostly known for. So I'll go and use templates. I'm a bit zoomed in so you can see everything. So I need to like scroll a bit around. But now you can see, without me having to do anything else than just setting in that template, I've got my workspace that generated with an introduction, how to get started with this workspace. So it tells me I can go in these collections and start playing with them, where to report issues, etc. So as I mentioned, this is working already out of the box. So if I wanted to see, how does contract testing look like in Postman, I can go in that collection, see the different steps to using it, and it says send a sample request. So I'll go ahead and send this, and then I can go and check the different test results. So you can see, I see how the tests work in Postman, I see how to send a request, and I see how to do contract testing, which is pretty good if you don't know where to start with. May give you an idea of how to like work that within your team. So now you've learned some stuff about Postman and you create that type of stuff with your own API within your own team, etc. So that's at the workspace level. We also have another one at the collection level. So let's say you're fine with all of these. Now you know what testing is Postman, but you're looking for more examples. Now when you create a new collection, so the same way you've got this little tooltip here to speed up your work with collection templates, and you can go ahead and find some. So you've got a lot more to pick from and different categories. So sorted by roles. And that kind of goes back to when we were talking about whether you're API producer or API consumer. So you can be, in that case, a QE, a full stack developer, front end, back end developer, etc. Or by use cases or industries. So I know somehow I think a lot of people are interested about AI nowadays. So I'm going to go with this one because I don't know. Somehow people like that. So one of the things we can see is, for example, if I look for translate, I'll use this template. And the same way I'm getting a collection, it's out of the box. It's got some endpoints ready to use, and I can send it and see what's happening. So for this one, I can see I'm sending hello, how are you? The source language is English and the target language is French. And then it translates and says, bonjour, comment ça va, which is the French version of it. But
so with collections, are you saying that all the variables are filled out as well and the test scripts are also filled out? So for people that are using these collections, they can go ahead and change those up as they like?
Well, good question, because actually for this one is an example of how a translation API would work. It's not the actual translation API. So if I were to change what's being sent here, finding new and sending it, the response is going to be the same because it's just a mocking API. It's just a fake API that uses that. So now I'm going to go and grab another one, which is using OpenAI, which some of you may be familiar with. It's an open language model that allows you to do conversations, etc. So I'll go pick up OpenAI Completion and Generations and use this one instead. So you can see there's a little GIF that tells you how to log in, etc. But let's say I did not read the documentation. Who would do that, right? Like everyone reads the documentation. or maybe not. But let's say I do not read, I can go ahead and start playing with it. So that endpoint is actually doesn't need you to log in. So I can just see the list of models. But if I were to use an endpoint that requires login, one of the new things that we've added as well is instead of you having to figure out why you're not authorized, how to get authorization for that API, etc., we now prompt you directly from there that you're missing authorization, and then you can click on that little helper and see how to set up new authorization. So this is actually API producers. So if you are an API producer, maybe you're working at Twilio or you're working at Salesforce or something, and you're providing APIs, it may make sense for you to provide that to your users. So now anyone that comes into Postman and start playing with your API, if they get authorization error, you can now prompt them with, oh, this is how you need to log in. This is where you can get the API key, or this is where you can create your OAuth to app, etc. So I'll follow. I'll go to the OpenAI API keys page. That's actually opening on my side window because for some reason I don't want you to see my OpenAI keys. So I'm just going to copy it over from here and paste it. And you can see once I paste it, I also have the option to set it as an environment. So I'll set it as an environment, and now I can use it throughout the collection. So let's try to send the same request now that I've just followed the steps one by one and see what happens. So what am I actually sending to this one? I'm asking it to write a limerick about APIs, and it comes back with an API so complex and deep, it triggers an endless beep. Is the best way to code using a tech field abode for software that's sure to be a leap. Cool. Thank you, OpenAI, for that limerick about APIs.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I think it makes the time to first call for an API a lot easier. I remember the original way that Postman used to work where you had to find that, but I think the authorization makes it a lot easier. So yeah, next time you guys get a 401, you'll know exactly what to do.
And it's exactly right. Like instead of having the user having to find your docs, how to log in or reading through things, we just prompt you where it makes sense. Mm-hmm. So again, as an API producer, do search for that. You can now see this little prompt, which is make authorizing easy for your user, and this will link you to a page to set that up. So that's one way to do it. So yeah, that's the first part. Now I'm going to move to something else, and that's when we move to this public workspace. So I can save all of these changes. It's all good. Let's move to what's new in Postman. So that's the one that was shared with you in the chat. So now you'll be able to follow along. Another thing that's new, actually, is whenever you want to import things, we've actually made the import experience much easier. So now when you click import, you can just paste anything, and it's not up to you to select what you're trying to import. Postman is just going to guess what it is. So if you're importing a URL, it's going to say, okay, this is a URL of a collection or of an open API or of a RAML specification, etc. It's going to import it. The other way to do it is if I just grab something on my other screen and bring it to Postman, I can drop it anywhere, and it's just going to import it straight away. So don't even need to open the import page. Just drop your stuff in there, and then you have it ready. So you may have noticed that collection is called performance testing. I don't know, so I'm not watching the channel at the moment, but I don't know if anyone's heard, but Postman now does performance testing. So we're an API testing tool. We've been doing contract testing or like single endpoint testing, etc. for a while. But one of our top requests was for performance testing. So we now have that in Postman. So I'll show you how to do this. So I've got this collection. I'm just going to quickly run through it. I've got 4 endpoints, one with large query parameters. So it's an endpoint that has tons of query parameters. I've got an endpoint that has not a lot, one that has a small body parameter. So you can see here, it's a small one. And then I've got this one, which is a 4.4. So the only reason I've added this one is so we have some errors when we do the performance testing, and you can see more stuff in the graph. So now, how do we access performance testing? If you're familiar with the collection runner, which you can access from right-clicking your collection, run collection, or clicking the little button at the top right of your collection. There's a new tab, which is performance. So as I mentioned, we've been doing functional testing for a while, and that's the options you've got here. But if you move on to the performance testing side of things, you've got more options. So now I can set up the number of virtual users. That's the number of users that are going to hit your endpoints. Based on your plan, you're going to have different limits here. So I'm going to leave it to default, and I'm going to make the test duration shorter. But anyway, I'll stop it before it finishes anyway. Then the other option at the end is fixed or ramp up. So what that means, if you say fix, it means from the moment you start testing, you're going to have 20 users hitting your endpoints. If you do ramp up, then you see the number of users ramping up throughout the whole run. So there's going to be more and more people hitting your API. In that case, I'm actually testing an API that's hosted by Postman. So, we'll hope it doesn't break, and we start running the tests. So let's see how it looks. So it started. Now I can see different things happening as it goes. So I can see the number of requests that are sent at the top left, the request per second, the average response time. And then I've got that red line is the number of errors, which should average around 25%, which is fine because I have one endpoint out of 4 that has errors. The number of the time of average response, and I can also show the request per seconds or the number of virtual users, and that's that like gray line, which is always the same. If you scroll down, you've got more information per endpoint. So I can see for each endpoint the number of total requests, time of average response, minimum, maximum, etc. So I should see the large query parameter is a bit higher than the small query parameters. That makes sense. And then I can see this one, which has errors, is erroring 100% of the time, which is fine. When you're done with your run, that's one thing. You've tested your endpoint. That's a good thing. But then you may want to see this again later on, right? So you can find all of the previous runs if you go to your collection. So I'll go back to my performance testing, and there's a runs tab here. And then in here, I've got all of my different type of runs. So functional, schedule, or performance. So if I go to performance, I can now go back to the one that I just ran. So you can see this just happened. Open the run, and then you see the same thing. So pretty good if you're like working as a team. You can share that with your teammate, or maybe you're in charge of running the test, but then you have someone else in your team who is in charge of recording whatever is happening. So that's the benefit of being able to share this. I see someone that says, as a QA, I like this. It's good. That's why we've created Postman. We want to please people. So, they're happy to read this.
Like this recently just GA'd, I want to say, in this past June. So I think the team is definitely looking for more people to try this feature out and see how it affects that. But I think it's a game changer, especially for people who use Postman specifically to test. Now they can do performance testing. It was a highly requested feature, I believe.
And it's just bringing more people to the same place. Like having, we talk about Postman as the API platform. It's the place where you should have everything related to your API. And now we've just added in API performance on top of that. So it's one more thing we've brought. So that's for API performance. I've got one more list of things to show, which is about documentation. So another thing that Postman is known for is documentation. So that link that we've shared with What's New in Postman is one way to share documentation. That's a public workspace. You can access it, you can share it with people, and they can come in here and play around with it. But then there might be different things you want to communicate. So obviously you could go into collection. So I'm going to use that same collection, and I could write some documentation here, right, about this collection, how to do X, Y, Z. We've added one thing now, which is you can add videos directly in the documentation. So it used to be that you had to link to a video, and then they could go and watch it somewhere else. Now all you have to do is paste the URL. So I'm going to go here and paste one. And then you can see it's me just talking about the VS Code extension, which is another thing I'm going to talk about. You can add a caption, so how to use VS Code, and then just save it. And now you can see my video is in here. It's inline. Anyone that accesses that documentation can start playing with it. Another thing we've added it's a little known thing, but it was also highly requested. is being able to add comments directly in the body of your request. So a lot of people were wondering, how do I tell people what they need to fit in there? This is using JSON. So if you add comments in JSON, that's not technically valid. So I can say this should be a string. So what we've done, you can now actually add JSON comments. We're just passing them, so removing them from the request before they're being sent. What this means is I can now add comments. So it could be this, or I can even add like multi-line comments. This, and this is a multi-line comment. And anyone that watches the documentation, so now if I access the documentation for that request, when I look at the example of the body, I can see this. So I have more information as to what needs to be where. But if I send a request, so if I send this, and I look at what's being sent, so I'm going to open the console and expand what was being sent, the request body, you can see none of it is actually included in what's being sent. So good for you as an API producer, because you can add more documentation directly in context, but you're also not impacting the API consumer, right? They don't need to strip it manually. They don't need to worry about these comments. So that's one of the benefits of being able to comment directly there. Let me quickly have a look at my script, because I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So once you have all of this ready, you've added your videos, you've added your JSON comments everywhere, you can publish the documentation. So if you go back to your full view documentation, you can actually publish it to have a standalone page for your documentation. So I'll go there. And what we've added here, and you see there's a little new tag, there's three things. One of them is appearance. You can switch between two themes, light, dark, or you can just have it adapt to whatever is the default system, like default theme your whoever is seeing your page is using. So if they're using a dark mode, then they'll see it in dark. If they're using a light mode, they'll see it light. You can change the logo, so that's going to be at the top left there. And you can change the colors. So it used to be to always be these default Postman colors. Now you can have them match whatever branding you have. The same way we've added SEO to make your pages more searchable and more findable, mostly. And you can also just move it to a public workspace directly. Once you've set that up, you can publish that page. And now you have this standalone link, which you can share along, etc. So this will open in the browser, so I can't show you that straight away. The last thing I want to talk about, and that's the thing you can see in that video, which is the VS Code extension. We've actually released it, a first iteration of it, just like the beta version of it during the last quarter. So now if you use VS Code, which is this one, you can add Postman directly. So instead of having to do what I just did, right? So I'm moving from VS Code to Postman when I want to send my request. You can just stay in Postman and actually show you, because it's pretty fast. So you can go to collections, search for Postman, and then it should be the top one. So I'm going to install that. It's installing. And now you can see there's this new icon on the left. So I'm already logged in because I had it installed before. But I can swap through the different workspaces I've been using. I'm on the same account. I can see the requests. And directly from VS Code, I can go ahead and send something. We've got more stuff coming for VS Code. This is just the first iteration of it. I'll actually get back to it a bit later in the webinar. But I think for now, that's it for my demo. I'll hand it over to Pooja, who's going to take over from there. Yeah, feel free to start sharing. Also, quick reminder, any questions about what I said, put it in the Q&A. We'll answer that up towards the end.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Arlemy. So it looks like you've shown how to use Postman in like the desktop client. You've shown it in VS Code. I'm actually going to be working off the web app. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So let me see if you can see this. So are you able to see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So one of the first features I wanted to talk to you all about that might be new, or that might be something that you've used is configuring your workspace sidebar to basically show the work that's relevant to you. So here you might see on my sidebar, I have collections, I have environments, I have history. If you're familiar with the original Postman, we had many different things available on the sidebar. But just to focus your work a little bit more, especially if you are a producer or you're a consumer, we have this feature where you're able to configure your sidebar. So if I'm a producer of an API, I can completely hide things like my collections, my environments, and I can show things like my APIs, and then,
So just like what's relevant to you, right?
Yes, exactly. So whatever is relevant to me, I am able to show and hide. So with that, I wanted to take a look at some new things that we have available, especially on the producer side with APIs. So one interesting feature that I wanted to talk about specifically on the API side is the ability to have schema to collection validation. So what that means is you're able to now take you're able to validate any collections that are linked to your API to make sure that your API implementation is consistent with your API definition. So let's take a deeper look. So here I have this API here called the Coffee Brewing API. So in here I have my documentation, I have my definition available, I have some paths that I've been working on. So for example, I have this path called brewing, and I can take a look at what I have in this path. So in this path, let's say I want to create this API. I'm not creating this 400 error right now, but I want to save this API and then take a look at what my collection looks like for these endpoints. So if you don't already know, with Postman on the producer side, what you can do is you can generate collections from your definition. So if I were to generate a collection from my definition, I can go ahead and click on generate collection. You always want to have this checked off, suggest updates to collection when definition changes. So this gives you more information, and it's consistent with your API definition. Your collection automatically can detect any inconsistencies between your API definition and your collection. So let's give this collection a name. So I'm going to call this Coffee Brewing Collection.
So I guess have it checked off if you do want to get the updates. If you do not want to get the updates, it's up to you to leave it unticked, right? We're not forcing it into you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an option. But our recommendation would be to keep it checked.
Yeah, and it just helps a little bit as you are testing and developing your API with your definition. It gives you a little bit of some notifications on what's changed, what's not changed. But I can definitely see why some people choose not to get it checked off. So, and you can always adjust your settings as well. So you can generate examples based on your schema as well. You can set characters, things like that. But these are features we've had previously as well. So let me go ahead and click on generate a collection. So now that my collection is generated, you can see that there are a couple of notifications I'm getting. So let's take a look at this update notification. So it looks like based on my API definition, there isn't any major updates. Sometimes you'll get that update notification, but we can take a deeper look at some of the other things that we have available here. So here I have one notification, which is a example warning. So Postman displays any warnings for any detected issues. So you can basically view the source of that warning, and if you resolve that, you'll get that itself will clear up. So I wanted to let everyone know that this validation is supported for OpenAPI 3.0 and 3.1 definitions specifically. So in this case, what I'm seeing is the warning is that the response body didn't match a specified schema. So in this case, in my response body, I'm using some integers. So if I take a closer look at my schema, I also have some integers in here as well, but there's some inconsistency with what my response body is and what my what I'm receiving here. So I can, of course, choose to address those, but since it's a warning, it's not a huge issue. But in this case, let me go ahead and add back my 400 error. So if I go ahead and add my 400 error again, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And if I save that, you should see that there should be some sort of update available. So I did see that earlier. So, okay.
Is it the live demo?
What was that?
Effect? Is it the live demo effect? Where it's
I think this is the live demo effect. Is it?
You can try refreshing the page just in case.
Refresh it. Just
Let's see.
I did try this earlier. Okay, so there we go. So we see an update. So let's take a look at what this update is. Okay, great. So here you can see that there is a error that I have enabled for this missing incorrect ingredient. So I've added that 400 error into my schema right here for that missing ingredient. So now that I see that update, you can see that right now I only have an example for brewing in process. And when I go ahead and update my collection, you should now see that example for that error appear as well. So you're seeing that you're getting detection validation. You're getting error validation detection with the orange dot, but you're also getting consistent updates that you've made to your API definition being reflected into your collection, not only in your requests, but also in your examples. So,
yeah. And I would mention one of the main benefits that I personally see to that is it means you don't have to regenerate an entire new collection, right? So if you already have stuff that you've changed somewhere else, you've added tests or anything, you don't need to re-copy them over and over. You can just update what's been changed. That's
yeah. So that's new. So just to let everyone know, just to kind of recap on that, if you're interested in getting those updates, make sure you generate from a definition and just tick off suggested updates, and you'll get the right updates available to your collections as you build out your API definitions. So with that, I wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into another feature that's new, which has to do with publishing APIs. So when it comes to publishing APIs, you can publish APIs manually within the Postman app itself. So to do that, you would want to click on Publish. And you can, of course, add your version labels. So here I'm going to add version 3. I've made a couple of updates. I've already created a V1, V2. I'm going to create a V3. And, I can add my release notes. So added errors into that. And I can publish that to a private API network if I wanted to. So when I publish this API, you can see that I'm viewing a published version of this API, which is a version that your consumers can see and your consumers can get work with. But there's another way to edit and publish APIs, which is through the Postman CLI. So the way to publish APIs, I wanted to share with you all the Postman CLI command. So to publish APIs through CLI, we have an example where you can use Postman API publish, And you can, with your API ID and then using the name tag to set your version, you can also publish any APIs that are available there. And you can add your release notes, as well as any collections available, as well as any API definitions, IDs available here. So let me just show you an example of how to go about doing that. So in this case, if I wanted to publish this API, I would need my API ID. And my API ID is available right here. If I click on my info tab, you can see your API details. You get your API ID, which is right here. And then you get your definition ID, which is right here. And then, so let's go ahead and add that. So let's do Postman publish. And I will go ahead and do that. And then let's add our API ID, which is this ID right here. And then we'll do -- name. And then we'll call this V4 since we've created V1, V2, V3. So let's do that and let's see if that works. So you can see that you're able to successfully trigger a publish for that API. And you are successfully able to publish your API, and you can see your published API right here now. So in that URL, you're able to see that your API is now published using the API CLI. So now we're seeing version 4 of that API. So
and that means you could automate that, right?
Yes. Yeah, so this basically allows you to now use automation to automate your publishing process as well with the CLI. I think a lot of people have used Postman CLI for testing, but now we're getting into the producer front of automating the publishing process as well. So here, if I wanted to take a look go back to editing my API, I can see all of the versions that I've created. Some of these I've created manually, some of these I've created using the CLI. So you get a nice history of those published APIs. So yeah, so I hope this kind of gives a little bit more insight on the producer front in terms of what you can do with, schema collection to schema validation, as well as API publishing. So just going back to our slides as well, just a few more updates that we have available. We have one other update that I wanted to share with you all is that we have a new lightweight Postman API client. And this allows you to work with Postman in an offline mode as well. So this is a great way to work with Postman in any case you don't have internet or anything like that. But we also have a big announcement where we are sunsetting our Scratchpad. So I think we have a lot of users that have used Postman, maybe that haven't logged into Postman, but are able to work off our Scratchpad and start hitting API endpoints. So we are in the process of sunsetting that feature. But with that, this blog has a really great examples of how you can go through migrating any data that you've worked with previously when you were working in the Scratchpad mode. So feel free to take a look at this blog and read on how you can migrate some of your data from the Scratchpad into maybe Postman account. So
I just want to add a quick thing just to be clear. We're not removing the ability to work without an account. You're still able to do this with this new version, like the new Postman API client. What we are adding the ability to use more request types, but we're removing some features that will make it that your current data in Scratchpad is not compatible with the new version. So do look at it to see how you can migrate that data so it works with the new one.
Yeah, I think since there are so many updates with, I guess, like all of our plans, I think it's a natural progression. So feel free to take a look at this blog. I think I'm not sure if our moderators have added that.
Yeah.
in the chat. So awesome. All right. And then with that, I think there's a couple of new things, especially on the enterprise front as well. So on the enterprise front, we have a feature called universal tagging, which allows you to discover and organize all of your Postman artifacts through tags. So you can add like free-form tags to organize any artifacts like collections, APIs, Workspace. So that's more on an organizational front. And then we have a feature for custom functions where you're able to create new custom spectral functions and provide custom logic that can be reused as well. So more functions that can be created for API governance there. And then we have a lot more updates to the new Enterprise Essentials plan that are including all of these features of universal tagging and things like that. So we have a new feature, just like we have the enterprise plan, but then also the enterprise essential plan that gives you different features there as well. So feel free to take a look at the postman.com enterprise page to learn a little bit more about some of our enterprise features. And then what's next? We have a lot of interesting, exciting things coming up next. Harlem, did you want to share any of that?
Sure. So I'm actually going to start with the second point because I've teased that a bit like right before about VS Code. So you've seen me when I was using VS Code, I was only sending requests. We're actually doing a pretty big release next soon. I don't want to give any dates, but soon, where you'll be able to use collection and environments as well in the VS Code extension. There's also live collections. So what live collections are, they allow you to add an SDK or a little plugin in your code, and it's going to automatically generate a collection based on the endpoints you have in your application. So no more creating the collections manually as you work on your code. It's just going to scan whatever endpoints you're doing and create the collection based on that. So it's a good thing when you're like starting your project, but it's also a good thing to plug into something that you've had for a while, but you never got to create a collection, or you have one and it keeps being like outdated. You can now plug that in there. So that's coming. There's a waiting list for it, and you can get it enabled. So we're probably sending some links for that. The third one is Postbot. So you know how I've mentioned AI as well on the first part. So we're actually adding we're sprinkling some AIs on top of Postman. One of them is to generate tests. So one of the things that is currently also being enabled is being able to generate a single test. And you can just, using natural language, you can say, test this endpoint that the schema is valid with this, and it's going to write all of the tests for you. We're adding more stuff, so you can now imagine in a near future that you'll be able to generate tests for an entire collection. You'd be able to generate documentation for an entire collection. You'd be able to generate mock data, fake data for your collection, a bunch of stuff. So yeah, there's a link in the chat as well. If you want to look at that, I would recommend it.
Yeah,
trying to think if there's anything else, but it's probably pretty good, no? For like what's next?
Yeah, I think so. I think Postbot is also still like early access as well. So I believe you can sign up for early access. So you'll be able to test that out and get notifications on it. I think that's I've seen demos of that, and it's a pretty cool thing. So and then there's a link at the bottom of that page for the public roadmap. We try to keep it updated. It might be a bit like late to get updated, but we're working on this. So you can just check that one. If you can't always join that webinar with us, you can just refer to that page. On the next page, we actually have a few links for you. So these are like recommendations of stuff you can do as well on your own time. The first one is Postman Intergalactic. This is our monthly webinars on different topics, including this one. But while we have the unboxing session, we also have sessions about API testing and automation, sessions about API security, sessions about Postman flows, plenty of topics. So you can go on that page and subscribe to different ones, whichever one you're interested in. And you'll be able to see the replays of the previous sessions as well. Postman Quick Starts is
tons of workshops on different topics as well. Some of them giving you certifications, some of them not, but all of them will teach you something, and that's what matters. So just Postman workshops as a whole. And now let's say after Intergalactic and Quick Starts, you still have questions about what you can do with Postman in your stack. Well, you can get to the community forum. Community forum is a great place to meet with other members of the community or us. We're all in there and answering some questions. So any open questions that you have, you can go in there. And the last one is actually a public workspace we've created in the team to give you like straight answers to how to do like the typical things in Postman, like how do you chain requests? How do you pass a variable from one place to another? How do you hash a query parameter? So all of these are collections that are there for you to just fork and start using. So would also recommend that one. I think with that said, we'll move on to the last slide. We actually don't have too many questions, so I'm going to take them now. But while I do this, there is this little link about the survey. Please fill that in for us, so we know what was good about that session, what wasn't, what we should do next time, or what we shouldn't do. This really helps us, and we keep on improving based on that from one session to the next. So that's very valuable for us. So with that said, we have actually one question in the Q&A. Yeah. So if there's more questions that want to come, please put them now, or forever hold your peace, or whatever you say. But we have Scott asking, with performance testing, can this be scheduled? So could I run a performance test every day at 9 a.m., for example? Not at the moment. We do have scheduled collection runs. So you can trigger a single run of a collection at a specific time. So it's from the same place. You can, if you go to the collection runs, you have this tab about scheduled runs, but you can't schedule performance testing yet. I'm saying yet, not because I know it's coming up, but because this is a request we've had. So it could be there eventually. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Start playing with this version, and then give us some feedback. Make sure that I'm already going to provide that anyway. But the more we hear about some feature requests, the more chances you have it to be enabled. So as you've seen, we've added performance testing because people were asking for that. We've added commenting in the body directly because people were asking for that. We're adding ways to automate stuff through the Postman CLI because users are asking for that. So we do take your feedback in, and we improve the product based on that. So yeah, I think that's all the questions we have. So we can actually close now. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Pooja.
Yes.
I think hopefully that was as great of a session as we teased it at the start. But with that said, thank you all. We'll see you at the next session, or maybe at the next live stream, or maybe on the community forum. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you had a great time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.